So we have a Dayton 650,000 BTU heater. So basically it came into the shop, just needs to get serviced, just kind of gone through, make sure everything's ready. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. So let's get right to it. So what we gotta do is we gotta pull this top off. So let me go ahead and grab some tools here. It's 5/16. Pull all these guys off. So some of those there up here on the top. There's a washer up on the top. I'm not sure exactly why, but they have a washer on the top outside of the screw. Except for this very front one here. Now, personally, I've never seen one this big. But really, they're all the same, except for BTUs and the size factor. All right, so slide it back. So we'll set this up here. All right. So for the most part, in terms of the gas tank and stuff, I've already drained, flushed out the gas tank. There's a plug right here on the bottom. And that plug, let me grab a flashlight real quick. So right here on the bottom is that drain plug. And so first what I usually do is I pump everything out, and then I'll pull the drain plug, get as much of the rest of fluids and debris out of this gas tank, and then I'll take my air compressor and kind of blow in there to help get as much as possible out. The problem is you can have a tendency to have a little bit of fluids in there because of where that plug is. It's not like it's right here at a corner where I can just tip it and everything comes out. It's actually in, so if this is the bottom and it's curved like this right down here, if it's right here, I still have this little cavity all the way up here. So what I do is I'll blow my air and I'll rock it back and forth to help kind of push those fluids back and forth to eventually get everything kind of drained out and flushed out as much as possible. So I already did that. There was a large amount of fluids in some of these, not in these, but more so the smaller ones. So, all right, let's go ahead and pull this fan cover off. And so all it does is it kind of recesses in this hole, and this metal is just slightly bent, so it's kind of pinching it. So on these, I have 3 of these, or total of 4 of these big ones and 4 of the smaller ones. On the one of these, I ended up having to replace this fuel line that goes all the way across to this injector. Now, what happened was, this is his old fuel line, and what happened was, it is installed like this, and it was rubbing right here, like you can see. So I ended up, try to get focus on that. So right there it was rubbing. And what's happened was this fuel line got moved, and then it was rubbing against this metal frame. And so when you service these and stuff, always check out where your fuel line is, make sure it's centered, make sure it's not rubbing on anything, because what happened was I go to test it and fuel's just spraying everywhere, and not exactly in an ideal situation to have, considering we have a big torch in the front. So I had to quickly shut that down. And not to mention these pumps here, you have your motor and then you have your pump. These pumps run around 120-ish PSI or 110. I'll have to check. Let's see. 100 PSI. So these should be set at 100 PSI. And so that's quite a bit of pressure that's going down. And so it's just spraying it everywhere. All right, so one thing you do is just kind of check fan, make sure the fan looks good, everything's moving, nothing's spent. Everything checks out, so that looks good. We have a what do you call it, photocell right here, and so what that's doing is that's sensing for light when let me try to get better light on there. So this photocell is basically sensing for light. It's looking through that hole to check to see if the burner is running by light. And then we also have a temperature sensor, which is this guy right here. Up here is our fuel injector, and then we have our spark gap, which we're gonna go through and clean. This is our fuel solenoid, and that's probably not too much to this. So we have basically from gas tank, we have a little strainer in here that we're gonna have to pull this up and out after we disconnect it from here and here. And then we also have a fuel, another fuel strainer slash filter right here. And it does look like it has some red fluids in there. Some of these did not. Some of these actually had water because there was water sucked up through this. So let's go ahead and we'll start from back here. We'll go ahead and disconnect these fuel lines and pull the fuel strainer out to clean. So it's just 15, let's see, yeah, 15/16 for the most part on a lot of these. And then that removes this little retainer. And then let me grab a crescent wrench. Now I always recommend when you are taking pipe fittings off or whatnot to back what you are torquing against. So like for example, this angled adapter here, I got my wrench on there and I'm going to hold it this way a little bit, you know, put a little bit of tension on it, so when I counterclockwise this nut, that it is, I'm not torquing everything on this housing. So now that has come loose and we can drop that down and then do the same thing up here. So that's disconnected, and then you just pull down gently. These are just copper lines, and then we can kind of work on fishing that out. And then as you can see, that's our fuel strainer. So let me grab my air real quick. So what I usually do is I'll take a toothbrush with a little bit of mineral spirits on it and just gently go over this. And then when you blow air over it, just be gentle that you don't pierce it. And all I'm doing is just kind of loosening up the debris that's on this strainer and trying to blow it off. If these are damaged, you'll have to replace it. There we go. So that is much better. So now, wipe this off. I'm going to wipe the top off here. Just make sure this seals as best as possible. We'll slide this back in and reinstall. We'll install our little retainer. Now, when I put these screws back in, these are just sheet metal screws, and it's just like not even a 1/16 of an inch. So I like to put them in back by hand. If you use your little mini Ugga Dugga, you can more so strip it out. It really does not take much at all. So what I do is just get it snug by hand. There we go. And then for these, these copper, so we have our sleeve here. And it's basically like when you cut the line and stuff, you put these little sleeves on there, and then you slide that sleeve in, and then your nut, make sure your nut's on first actually, and then you put your sleeve on, and it's loose, and then you just slide it in, holding this in, and then you tighten up this and it basically crimps it. That's kind of how that works. So we just get these in by hand first. All I'm doing is I'm getting it in and then holding it while tightening it up by hand. And now I'll back this. Now since I'm going the opposite direction, I'm pushing this one just gently that way in the opposite direction, but just being gentle. You don't need to crank these. Just get them nice and snug. There we go. Perfect. So that should be good. All right, so fuel strainer. Now we'll hit our fuel filter / strainer here. I'm hoping, yeah, see, this whole thing's gonna start turning on me if I'm not careful. So let's see. There is basically a nut-like thing. So there we go. So this is a little filter / strainer. And then let me dump, so that looks like good kerosene. In fact, I can just dump that back in it. So I don't see anything wrong in that, except I do see some debris in there. So we'll clean that out. So with some air. And then some mineral spirits. There we go. So that is clean. And then we have our little strainer here. So on the bottom of this strainer actually has a magnet. So magnet, I'll just hit a little bit with mineral spirits. Not really have to do that, but overall, the best way to clean the magnet is with air. It will help kind of blow the grit off. And then with my toothbrush, I'm just gently kind of helping nudge the debris that's on there. And usually I like to kind of gently blow from the inside first and then go from the outside. And I'm not going directly, I'm going at an angle to kind of blow it off. So I'm not embedding it in there. And while I'm doing that, I'm looking at the filter and I'm checking to make sure the strainer is fine, the membrane looks good and everything. So there gonna flip it over, do it the other way. And there we go. Now our strainer is nice and clean. So we'll put the magnet back on. And this seats up just like so. And then make sure I'm backing this as I tighten this. Now on these, again, you don't have to go crazy, just get them nice and snug, like that. All right, so we covered the fuel there. Now we are going to pull the spark gap. So to do that, we disconnect the spark, I guess you can say spark plug wire. I mean, it's basically the same thing. And then this is our spark gap. We take a 5/16, unscrew this, and we should be able to pull it out. Oh man. So this one is broken. So that's not good. So we're gonna have to replace this. So it could be that someone over tightened it or hit something, and I just dropped my nut too. So there we go. Okay, so normally on these, if they're not broken, you can basically take it to your wire wheel. In fact, I'll show you real quick. I'll have to get a new one. But what you do, just go to your wire wheel. And normally I can take it with it like this and then gently run it like that, and then gently rotate it. And let me go ahead and clean it. I'll show you. We are going to have to replace this though. And most important part is more so towards the end, because that's where the gap is going to be primarily. Okay, so be like that. And then let's go to our measuring device. This 3.5 millimeters. So we'll set this at 3.5. So I'm going to show everything. And in fact, I'm going to reinstall it temporarily for the purpose of this video, but I am going to replace this. So as close to 3.5 as possible. We'll call that good. I'm going to lock it in. So that's 3.45. So if this was together, you basically measure the end and make sure it is 3.5, and that just barely fits in there. I think what could have happened is if this was to be adjusted, what someone could have done is grab this and pulled on it, causing it to break. That's the only time I see these usually break. Usually how I do it is I'll put a pair of pliers here and put a pair of pliers here and pull it this way to try to reduce any tension on this. But for the purpose of this video, we'll call that good, but 3.5 millimeters, and that's pretty common for all of these. So, but that's, you clean and set the gap, and then you'd reinstall it. me grab my tool, try to keep this all in place as it should be. There we go. And then you can plug your spark plug wires back in, just like any spark plug wire. And that would be how you clean and set the spark plug gap on that. So now we go ahead and do our nozzle. So to do that, we got to take the nozzle out, and what I got to do is I got to back this and then disconnect this fuel line. There we go. So that's disconnected. Now, let's go ahead and take, should have put that on, kind of jumped the gun. But let's go ahead and take these bolts off real quick. They're just 5/16. Sometimes once you break it loose, you can. I didn't want to do that, but we will fish that out of there. And then the same thing over here. This time taking care to not drop that. And then we have another one. They're kind of hard to see. Actually, right over here, you can see it a little bit better. That one's off, and then we have one on the bottom. Trying to get the fan just right so I can get my hand in between. Got that one. And then the last one, I believe, is on this side. Right here. There we go. So since the wire is still attached here, and I shouldn't have to disconnect all that. Before I forget, I need to fish out my screw out of there. So let me do that. Magnet on stick. Hopefully I can just find it. There we go. I think I felt it. Got it out of that abyss. All right. So on the front of these, this is what it looks like. You have your spark gap right here, and then you have in your ejector. And then of course, fuel's coming in through here. This fuel solenoid will open up to allow the fuel to go through when in use. So to take that off, I'm gonna grab a socket. All right, so take our socket. Break that loose. And then pull this off. So on these, they have a little strainer right there. And you can see all the debris, just very, very fine debris. So what we got to do is brush that, take a brush, brush it, and then what I like to do is blow from the tip out to, and then gently the reason why I blow through here is just kind of blow any crud back. There we go. And that's how you clean your tip. So now once we do that, I notice there's a little bit of crud there. So, and you can see the fuel that's sitting behind there, that's trapped from that fuel solenoid being closed. Now we'll go ahead and put this back on. Taking care not to cross thread it. So if you feel like it's not starting right, just back it off and try again. Never force any of this. Now let me grab the socket and my wrench. There we go. Now we can go ahead and reinstall it. And the direction it was with it up like this. So now I'm going to start with the top screw. And just get it started at least by hand to kind of hold it in place. And then basically got to go through and get them all in. And this is where I would definitely take great care into making sure you don't drop anything. Because it'll be a little harder to fish. There we go. All I'm doing is just getting each one in, not snug, but started. So I still have wiggle room to lift this up and down a little bit. Now we get on that side. Make sure. And then the very bottom one, which is hard to kind of see. So I'm gonna have to kind of, actually I might be better off on this side. So I'm kind of feeling for it. There we go. Now that we got them all started, just snug them up. In fact, what I always encourage people to do, use a screwdriver handle, or if you're using a wrench like this, put your hand up here. If you're out here, you got a lot of torque, so it'll be easier to over torque. Something like this, you can still over torque it, but it's a little harder. So reach in here and then get it nice and snug. And it doesn't take much. Again, it's just pot metal. There we go. So that is how you do the injector. Now let's go ahead and get our spark plug or spark, well, I guess you call it spark plug wires back on. I wouldn't call this a spark plug that is attached to, but a spark plug gap. All right, so last thing we got to do is down here we have this what do you call it, Photocell, and I noticed it wasn't properly seated, so it was actually really easy to pull it out to this point. And what you do is you pull it out, take care in noting how this looks and that you don't bend this. Some of them, especially some of the smaller ones, they're at an angle, so this is pulled back a little bit and it's looking in more at an angle. This one's more direct on. If you do bend that, make sure you bend it back in its proper direction. Now what we got to do is we got to clean that Photocell, and to do that we grab some isopropyl alcohol, and what I do is grab a little Q-tip and dip this down in there, get it pretty soaked, and then go down into this Photocell and clean that. Then what I do is I'll take my air to make sure it's fully dry and clean. Now we'll get this Photocell properly installed. Into how you know it's properly installed is on here there's this little rib. The metal sits between that rib and this back here, so it needs to sit in there, otherwise it's not properly seated and you could have issues. So what I do is I'll grab a little bit of WD, I'll spritz it on my finger, and then on the end of this I'll just kind of run it around like so. Then I'll slide that Photocell in there, and then I'll try to pinch and push in if I can. So I felt that one side go in, and then once I get the one in, then you can take it and kind of turn it to get it locked in place. And now if I push, it doesn't come out, and that's properly installed. So that's how it should be. So what I did is I pinched it on, and then once I got that to pop in, I then kind of rotated as I pushed to get the rest of it to pop in. Okay, so now we don't want to forget, we have our fuel line right here. So just like the other, has a little sleeve on it. So it goes up, and what sucks is that nut is down there. That's always fun. I shouldn't have dropped it down there, but that's okay. Let's see if I can. The only downside with some of this stuff is it kind of there we go. Okay, so we got it back up. So you basically slide this hose up, or fuel line up, and then slide and hold it up, and then slide or rotate your nut. Once I get that snug, then I can go ahead and back it with a crescent wrench. And just snug this. You don't need to go crazy. In fact, this needs to be more at an angle. And then there we go. So that's tight. So now when you mess with these fuel lines, make note. These I try to get these centered. You just gently pull it. Same thing over here. Make sure this one's centered. And now that they're both centered, everything looks good. So now all we got to do is test it. Generally, these are pretty straightforward unless you run into some problems. We are going to have to replace that, but at least we got it in place so we can do some testing, and I can show you what it looks like. So let me get a few things out of the way and rotate this and face it outside the door. So on these, since I basically drained the tank, flushed it all out, I gotta grab a block. I grab like a 4x6. I'm gonna move this forward a little bit more, but grab a 4x6, lift this up and put it up in the front. Otherwise, you won't get the fuel at that strainer and enough up into that. And we can also confirm that if we are getting fuel in there by looking at this fuel filter over here. So the reason why I test this first like this is so I can make sure that fuel line is good, this fuel line's good, and anything else and everything else looks good before I put everything together. You don't want to run them long, but just enough for testing purposes, because I don't want to put it all back together and find out that I have that fuel line leaking there, let's just say, to that injector. And then all of a sudden we eventually have a fire inside here instead of fire inside this burner. So let's go ahead and put some diesel in this. These you can use kerosene, diesel, there's a few options. I'm just gonna see if I can find that on here. Hopefully that's enough for testing. On these they say they can run kerosene, diesel, and fuel oil. So let's go ahead and open this door. So before I start it up, I need to pull this little plug, and this is where you go to measure pressure. So let me get this removed. See, it's just that little plug there. And then we're gonna add my little PSI gauge here. This should measure at around 100, and if we have to, we can make the adjustments using this flathead screw right there. So on these, you don't need to put any tape on it. Just get it like so, and don't force anything. All right, so now make sure that's off. I always like to have that turned down. Before I start this up, I forgot that there was some fuel that came off of that fuel line and dripped in here into this cavity here. So I need to clean that. So grab a paper rag. It's not a huge deal, but if you have enough of it, it could become a deal. So you just don't want any standing fuel. And then I'm making sure that I didn't bend that fuel line. Everything looks good. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm seeing this fill, and then I'm checking these fuel lines. And then if I have to, I'm gonna shut this off right away. Now on these larger units, when you shut it off, this fan's gonna run for a little bit, and that is to cool the burner. So if I don't want any power, I'll just pull this plug. So just a note on that. So let's go ahead and fire it up. And temp's low, so we're gonna crank the temp up. There we go. Then over there should be our spark gap. Yep. I'm checking over here now. Yep, see, we get fuel. Fuel's coming up. It's filling up. I'm gonna get ready to turn this off if I see any fuel starting to leak. See pressure building. So I noticed it got a code right here, a CC. So I turned it off because I think it coded out. And I think it's primarily because it took so long, it wasn't seeing anything. Now CC, I don't know what that code is exactly. E1 would be Photocell, and then E2 would be room temperature sensor, and then E3 would be thermostat switch. CC, I'm not sure what that is. I would have to look that up. But knowing that I have air in this line because I had it disconnected and stuff, I don't think I have a fair chance, or I gave it a fair shot, so I'm gonna try it again. So plug it back in and then turn it on. Getting ready to turn it off if need be. There we go. Everything looks good there. Everything looks good there. That's looking really good. Pressure is a little high. Let me grab. There we go, see? We're at 100 PSI now, where it should be. But I think it went off because I probably, yeah, there really isn't any fuel. So I'm gonna shut it down. I'm gonna do a quick lookup on what CC is because I saw it one more time. So let me do that real quick and I'll get right back with you. So I wasn't able to find out what CC means. I'm assuming it has something to do with the fuel. I added a little bit more fuel. We're gonna go ahead and fire this up and test again. I did double check fuel lines, everything so far looks good. I just need to make sure that CC isn't coming on after X amount of time. So let's go ahead and test this. Coming up, so that looks good. Okay, so I'm going to turn it off. So it's stop burner, fans running. What's interesting, it shows CC when I turned it off. So you know what that means? That is probably cooling it. That's what that means. It's in the cool cycle. So we're gonna make sure it shuts down. goes. And I just want to check this fan. I see it wobbling a little bit. I just want to see if I can see what could be just slightly, maybe slightly bent. And just looking at it, it actually looks pretty good. So I don't think it's anything to be concerned about. All right, so let's go ahead and get our cover installed. We'll go ahead and take our pressure gauge off. And then making sure this is clean, and reinstall our plug. And when we do it, just snug it. You don't have to go crazy. There we go, like so. Then our fan cover, and on this, these go into these little slots like so. Now just be careful if you're running this burner is going to be hot. And that seats right inside there. Make sure everything looks like it's lining up. So now we can go ahead and reinstall the screws up in the front. Actually, so that's on, and then these rear 3-head washers. Now on this, they have these little metal clips. Let's see if I can show you. Maybe back here. See the little metal clips? So you can replace these if needed. So I'm gonna use my little Ugga Dugga, but I'm just gonna take care not to bite, not to keep it going, just get it snug. You don't have to go crazy. Now the problem is because I snugged those up there, it was just slightly off, but I have a lot of tin here that I can kind of move around a little bit. To fix that. So now that we got the lid on, we'll go ahead and fire it up again. Just make sure everything looks good. Plug it in, wipe up a little bit of fuel that dripped from pulling that. We'll fire it up. that's exactly what it is. So what I did is I turned the temp setting from like 100 degrees down to like 40, and I get CC. So that's telling me it's cooling it off. While it's cooling down, so all I was doing is while it was cooling down, the pump is still under 100 psi up to that fuel solenoid. So all I'm doing is I'm kind of looking around, shining my light in here, seeing if I see anything, any fuel leakage anywhere, and I don't see anything. So overall, that's how you service one of these Dayton heaters. It's not your typical size, but your smaller ones are generally a little bit easier. Sometimes some of the stuff can be a little bit harder to mess around with because things are a little bit more in the way, but overall the basics still all apply. So anyway, on to the next one.